Hey there, settle in tonight, because we're about to step into a world of impossible expectations and hidden exhaustion. A world where your worth was measured by how silent you could be, how still you could sit, how perfectly you could pretend that breathing through whalebone didn't hurt. Tonight you're going to live an entire day as a Victorian woman, and I promise you by the end of it you'll understand why so many of them took to their fainting couches, not from weakness, but from the sheer weight of performance. Before we begin this journey, go ahead and like this video if you're already cozy, and subscribe if you genuinely enjoy these deep dives into history. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love knowing who's awake with me in the quiet hours. Now, dim those lights, maybe get a fan going for that soft background hum, and let's ease into the corseted, complicated, utterly exhausting world of a Victorian lady. You're about to discover that being a woman in the 1800s wasn't the genteel, romantic existence we see in period dramas. It was labor disguised as leisure, survival packaged as propriety, and rebellion hidden in the smallest gestures. From the moment your eyes opened before dawn to the second you closed your diary in secret at midnight, every single action was choreographed, judged, and weaponized. You'll spend hours getting dressed just to sit still. You'll make calls without actually visiting anyone. You'll read books while pretending not to think. And yes, you'll discover why the vapors were weakness. But perhaps the only honest response, a world that demanded women be ornamental, obedient, and utterly invisible. So take a deep breath while you still can, because in about 30 seconds, you're going to be laced into a corset so tight that breathing deeply becomes a distant memory. Welcome to a day in the life of a Victorian woman. It's going to be beautiful, suffocating, and absolutely unforgettable. Chapter 1. The morning performance. The darkness in your bedroom is complete and cold, the kind of cold that seeps through quilts and settles into your bones like an unwelcome guest. You wake before the sun has even considered rising, not because you want to, but because this is what's expected. The fire in your bedroom grate died hours ago, and now your breath fogs visibly in the air as you lie there, postponing the inevitable. There's no central heating in 1850s England, just coal residue in your lungs, and the memory of warmth that abandoned you somewhere around 3 in the morning. You can't simply pull the blankets higher and drift back into sleep. That would be self-indulgent, and self-indulgence is a luxury your gender isn't permitted. Somewhere below, in the servants' quarters, a maid younger than you and far more exhausted is already awake, stoking fires, boiling water, preparing the elaborate ritual that will transform you from a sleeping human into an acceptable ornament for society-says viewing pleasure. The bell rings, a sharp silvery sound that cuts through the pre-dawn quiet. You ring back, a delicate pull of the cord by your bedside, and within minutes she appears, arms laden with the instruments of your daily torture. A basin of water that's never quite warm enough, despite her best efforts. Your undergarments arranged in the precise order they'll be applied. Chemise, drawers, stockings, petticoat, and the dreaded corset. The corset. Just looking at it makes your ribs ache in anticipation. It's a beautiful object in its own way. Cream-colored silk with delicate embroidery. Whalebone stays carefully sewn into channels. Laces that will soon be pulled with surprising force. But beauty and comfort have never been friends in your world, and the corset exists to prove that daily, hourly, with every breath you take. You stand in your thin chemise, gripping the bedpost as she positions the corset around your torso. The fabric is cool against your skin, and for a moment, before the lacing begins, it's almost comfortable. Then her hands find the laces and begin to pull. Gently at first, then with increasing pressure. Your ribs compress. Your lungs protest. You feel your heart thump awkwardly against the restriction of whalebone, displaced by the architecture of propriety. You want to say, that's enough, but there's no such thing as enough tightness. Your silhouette must be immaculate, your waist impossibly small, your posture ramrod straight. The corset isn't just undergarment, it's a statement. I am disciplined, I am controlled, I am willing to suffer for beauty. Without it, you're just a woman with a body. With it, you're a lady with a shape. She pulls tighter. You grip the bedpost harder. You've been doing this since you were 14, old enough to be properly dressed, and your body has molded itself around the daily compression. Your ribs have learned to yield, your lungs to function on less air, your spine to maintain impossible straightness even when the corset comes off. You being slowly sculpted into an ideal that has nothing to do with comfort and everything to do with male aesthetic preference. The bustle comes next, that absurd construction of padding and wire designed to make your rear protrude dramatically, while your waist appears even smaller by contrast. If you're fortunate, it's stuffed with horsehair or cotton. If you're not, it's filled with wire frames that catch on furniture and make sitting down a calculated maneuver. The bustle isn't about beauty, it's about spectacle, about making a woman's body into something so exaggerated it becomes more costume than flesh. Your gown slides over your head, heavy with fabric and expectation. The sleeves must be arranged just so, the bodice fastened with dozens of tiny hooks and eyes, each one requiring patience and steady fingers. Your maid's hands are cold as she works, and you notice, not for the first time, that she hasn't made eye contact all morning. That's part of the dance too. If you're of any social standing, the servants must remain invisible, even as they dress you, hold you, transform you into someone presentable. The face in your mirror doesn't look like someone ready to conquer anything. She looks like someone ready to be seen, but not heard, admired but not challenged, present but not quite real. And that, you understand with a resignation that sits heavy in your corseted chest, is exactly the point. Now comes the hair, that elaborate crown of femininity that will take the next hour to construct. If your maid is skilled, the process will be merely uncomfortable. If she's not, it will border on torture. Your hair must be curled, pinned, braided, or puffed into something that signals your age, marital status, and social rank all at once. Too elaborate, and you're trying too hard. Too simple, and you're letting yourself go. The perfect hairstyle is one that appears effortless while requiring enormous effort to achieve. You sit at your vanity, and she begins brushing, each stroke pulling at tangles from yesterday's elaborate coiffure that you slept in, twisted into rag curls that were supposed to set overnight, but mostly just prevented restful sleep. The brush catches, pulls, makes your scalp sting. You wince, but don't protest, because protesting would make this take longer. And you've learned that endurance is the only way through. The hot curling tongs come next, heated over a flame until they're just short of dangerous. She tests them on a scrap of paper, watching to see if it scorches. The smell of singed hair is so common in your world that you barely notice it anymore. She works section by section, wrapping your hair around the heated metal, holding it there while you hold your breath, hoping she doesn't burn your scalp, your forehead, your ear. It's happened before. The small scars hidden by your hairline testify to the casualties of beauty. As she works, you think about the girl who does this every morning, whose own hair is scraped back into a simple bun, because she doesn't have time for curls whose hands are raw from labor, while yours remain soft and useless. The irony isn't lost on you that she makes you beautiful while remaining invisible herself, that her skill is what allows you to appear naturally lovely, effortlessly put together. Pins slide into your hair, each one a small bite against your scalp. Bobby pins that will give you a headache by noon. Hairpins that will leave small indentations you'll feel when you finally take them out tonight. Your hair is being transformed into architecture, and like all architecture, it requires a foundation of small pains. When she's finished, you have ringlets at your temples, a smooth crown of braids, and an elaborate bun at the back that has been padded with a rat made from your own shed hair, saved in a small porcelain box on your dresser. The rat gives volume, makes your hairstyle impressive, and you try not to think too hard about the fact that you re-wearing your own dead hair to make your living hair look more alive. But here's the crucial part. After an hour of heat, pain, pins, and carefully arranged suffering, your hair must look effortless, not styled, natural. As if you woke up like this and simply happened to be perfect. That's the game. The labor must be invisible. The result must appear inevitable, as though beauty is something you possess, rather than something you construct daily through small torments. A hat comes next, because heaven forbid your hair be visible outdoors without proper covering. The hat is a confection of feathers, ribbon, and fabric flowers that would be charming if it didn't threaten to undo all the work that just went into your hairstyle. But fashion demands the hat, so the hat is pinned carefully. More pins do more hair into more scalp, and you're informed that you look lovely. You glance in the mirror one final time. The woman looking back is acceptable, marriageable, proper. She's also a stranger you've been, constructing every morning for years. A performance so practiced you've almost forgotten there was ever anyone underneath. You descend the stairs carefully, because the weight of your skirts, the restriction of your corset, and the precarious architecture of your hair make every movement calculated. A misstep could be catastrophic, not because you might fall, but because someone might notice the fall, might question your grace, might wonder if something is wrong with your balance, your nerves, your character. The breakfast room awaits, and with it, the next performance in your daily theater of femininity. The men are already seated, as they always are, having dressed in a fraction of the time it took you to become presentable. Your father rustles his newspaper, the sound a signal that conversation may now begin, but only if you have the right kind of voice, the right kind of things to say. You're offered tea and toast, plain and unbuttered, unless someone else reaches for the butter first. You can't be seen as too eager, too hungry, too anything. Eating isn't really about nourishment anyway. It's about demonstrating restraint, delicacy, the ability to nibble rather than consume. You cut your toast into precise squares and chew each bite thoroughly, not because you're hungry, but because looking decorative while you eat is more important than the eating itself. Around you, conversation flows, but you're not really part of it. Your audience, atmosphere, decoration. Your role is to observe and smile, to speak only when spoken to agree without having opinions. A misplaced comment at breakfast can echo through the entire day, can shift how you're perceived, can determine whether you're invited to dinner parties or quietly dropped from guest lists. If you're married, your husband might remark on the weather, and you'll respond with practiced pleasantness. If you're unmarried, you sit in the silence and wait, always waiting, for your life to begin, for someone to choose you, for permission to exist more fully. The waiting is its own kind of labor, exhausting in its stillness. Breakfast ends not when you're finished eating, but when the men decide they're finished. You rise only after they do, never before, because to leave first would be presumptuous, would suggest you have somewhere more important to be, and women don't have important places to be. You thank a cook you didn't see for food you barely ate, and you retreat back upstairs to your room. But you're not retreating to rest. You're retreating to prepare for the next phase of your day, to check your appearance again, to dab lavender water on your wrists and neck in hopes it will mask the scent of stress and constraint. Outside your window, the world is waking up, factory whistles blowing, horses clattering on cobblestones, life happening at a pace you're not permitted to match. You check your reflection one more time. Perfect posture, perfect hair, perfect dress. You're ready now, ready to be watched, ready to navigate another day in a world that loves women most when they're beautiful and silent. The real day is about to begin, and with it, the exhausting work of making constant performance look like effortless nature. Chapter 2. The Social Battlefield. The mid-morning light filters through your bedroom window, pale and uncommitted, as if even the sun isn't quite sure how much energy to invest in this November day. You've returned to your room after breakfast, not to rest, but to prepare for what comes next, the intricate social warfare known as calling hours. Your writing desk awaits, covered in cream-colored calling cards, invitations written in careful script, and a ledger where you track every social obligation, like a general planning a campaign. You sit carefully, mindful of your corset and bustle, and review the cards that arrived yesterday. Mrs. Pemberton visited while you were out. Her card is folded at the corner, meaning she came in person rather than sending a servant. This obligates you to return the visit within a fortnight or risk being labeled inattentive. Lady Hartwell sent her card, but didn't fold it, a subtle signal that she merely wanted her presence noted, not necessarily reciprocated. The language of calling cards is more complex than any written text, a code of folds and corners and timing that determines your social standing. You open your own card case, examining the pristine rectangles with your name engraved in elegant script. Each card represents a potential interaction, a door you might open or close, an alliance you might forge, or an enemy you might accidentally create. The Victorian social world operates on these tiny pieces of paper, and mismanaging them can be as devastating as any financial loss. Your maid appears with your outdoor things: gloves, hat, parasol, and the calling card case. You're going out, not for pleasure, but for duty. The morning calls must be made, and they must be made between 11 and 1 o'clock, no earlier, no later. Arriving at 10:30 would mark you as desperate or ignorant of proper timing. Appearing at 2 would be equally disastrous, missing the acceptable window entirely. The carriage is waiting. You settle into it, careful to arrange your skirts so they don't winkle, and begin your rounds. The first house belongs to Mrs. Aldridge, a woman whose good opinion could make or break your social season. You don't particularly like her, but liking has nothing to do with calling. This is about maintaining position, about being seen to do the right things in the right order. The butler answers, and you present your card. Is Mrs. Aldridge receiving? The answer determines everything. If she's home and willing to see you, you'll endure 15 minutes of careful conversation. If she's not home, you'll leave your card and escape, having fulfilled your obligation without the exhausting work of actual interaction. Today, unfortunately, she's receiving. You're shown into the drawing room, where Mrs. Aldridge sits like a spider at the center of her web, teacup in hand, eyes sharp behind a pleasant smile. You take your seat, perching on the edge of the chair, because your corset makes deep sitting impossible, and because appearing too comfortable would suggest you plan to stay longer than the prescribed 15 minutes. The conversation begins, a delicate dance of meaningless pleasantries that mask everything that's really being said. She mentions the weather. You agree it's been unseasonably cold. She remarks on a mutual acquaintance's new bonnet. You offer a carefully neutral compliment that could be interpreted as either sincere or subtly critical, depending on one's perspective. She mentions that her son has returned from university, and you understand this is the real purpose of the visit. She is letting you know he is available, assessing whether you're suitable, determining if your family's standing matches her ambitions. You sip tea you don't want and smile until your face aches. Every word is calculated, every gesture measured. You compliment her curtains, her teapot, her choice of biscuits. The compliments aren't generous. They're strategic, oils that keep the social machinery running smoothly. She accepts them with equal strategy, deflecting with false modesty while clearly pleased. 15 minutes expire, marked by the clock on her mantel. You rise, making your excuses with practiced grace. She doesn't try to keep you. Both of you understand the rules. You've performed your duty. She's assessed you, and now you're free to continue your rounds. Your card goes into her silver tray with others. Evidence of your visit. Proof that you're maintaining proper social standards. The carriage takes you to the next house, and then the next. Some visits you're received, forced to perform the same careful ballet of tea and talk. Others you're mercifully spared, leaving your card with the butler and moving on. Each interaction is noted in your mental ledger, tracked and tabulated, because failing to return calls, forgetting to reciprocate, or showing favor too obviously can result in social death. By the time you return home, you're exhausted from maintaining perfect posture, perfect speech, perfect everything for 3 solid hours. Your face hurts from smiling. Your back aches from sitting upright. Your mind is foggy from the effort of saying nothing meaningful while appearing engaged and interesting. You visited 6 houses, drunk 5 cups of bad tea, and accomplished absolutely nothing except maintaining your position in a game whose rules seem designed to exhaust rather than enlighten. But wait, the morning isn't over. Now comes the moment when you must be home to receive calls yourself. The cards you left this morning mean that other women will be making their rounds, and you must be present, properly dressed and positioned in your drawing room, ready to receive whoever appears. You can't leave the house, can't relax, can't let down your guard because at any moment, someone might arrive. You settle in your drawing room with a piece of embroidery, not because you're passionate about needlework, but because a woman must always appear productively occupied. Idle hands suggest idleness of character, and idleness is perhaps the worst sin a Victorian woman can commit after having opinions. The bell rings. Mrs. Grafton has arrived, and now you must perform the role you just endured 6 times. Hostess, gracious and attentive, offering tea and biscuits, making conversation about nothing while both of you assess each other's dress, manner, and position. She stays exactly 15 minutes, as the rules dictate, and then departs, leaving behind her card and the exhaustion that comes from sustained performance. Another ring, another visitor. This time it's Lady Merewether, older and more established, someone whose approval matters. You sit straighter, smile brighter, work harder to appear effortlessly charming. She mentions a dinner party she's hosting, and you understand you're being auditioned. If you perform well in this 15-minute window, you might be invited. If you falter, say something too clever, or too dull, too loud or too quiet, the invitation will go to someone else. The afternoon wears on in this fashion. A parade of women in elaborate dresses, all performing the same exhausting ritual of seeming interested while being evaluated. By the time calling hours end at 3 o'clock, you've received 8 visitors, left 12 cards around the neighborhood, and spent 5 hours in a state of high alert, monitoring every word, every gesture, every micro-expression. You're finally alone in your drawing room, and the silence is overwhelming. Your corset feels even tighter than it did this morning, compressed by hours of rigid posture. Your face is sore from the frozen smile you've maintained. Your throat is raw from speaking in the carefully modulated tone that marks proper ladies. And for all this effort, what have you accomplished? Nothing tangible. You've simply maintained your position, prevented yourself from sliding down the social ladder, kept yourself visible in a world where being forgotten is the greatest catastrophe. You think about the calling card ledger, that small leather book where you track every social obligation. Names, dates, whether calls were returned, who owes whom a visit. It's like accounting, but instead of tracking money, you're tracking social capital, that invisible currency that determines everything about your life. Who you can marry, where you're invited, how you're perceived, whether you matter. The absurdity of it all strikes you sometimes, usually in these quiet moments after the performance ends. Hours of your life spent drinking tea you don't want with women you don't particularly like, following rules that seem designed to waste time rather than create genuine connection. But what's the alternative? To refuse to call is to remove yourself from society entirely, to become one of those pitied spinsters who live on the margins, invited nowhere, connected to no one. You stand and move to the window, watching carriages roll past, women in other drawing rooms performing the same rituals you just completed. Somewhere in this city, hundreds of women are doing exactly what you did today, dressing elaborately, visiting briefly, saying nothing meaningful, and calling it a day's work. The thought is both comforting and depressing. You're not alone in this strange theatrical existence, but that doesn't make it less exhausting. Evening is approaching, and with it, new obligations. But for now, in this brief window between afternoon and evening, you allow yourself a moment of honesty. You hate this. Not all of it, not always, but often enough that the hatred has become a low, constant hum beneath your daily life. You hate the performance, the calculation, the way genuine feeling must be suppressed in favor of strategic pleasantness. You hate that your entire existence seems designed to be looked at rather than lived. But you'll do it all again tomorrow, and the day after, and every day until you die or marry, or somehow escape this elaborate cage made of calling cards and social obligations. Because in your world, this isn't optional. This is survival, dressed up in silk and presented as genteel leisure. And you've become very, very good at surviving. Chapter 3. The Domestic Theater. The afternoon sun slants through the drawing room windows, casting long shadows that make the furniture look both softer and more defined. You've survived the morning's social warfare, and now comes a different kind of performance, managing your household. If you're fortunate enough to have servants, this means supervising their work while maintaining the fiction that you don't actually work yourself. If you're less fortunate, it means doing all that work while pretending you're merely keeping house, as if the endless labor of maintaining a Victorian home is somehow leisurely. You retrieve the household ledger from your writing desk, a worn leather volume that contains the financial reality of your domestic life. Unlike the social calling card ledger, this one is never shown to guests. Money, actual numbers and accounts, is considered too vulgar for public discussion. Yet you re-expected to manage it with the precision of a bank clerk while maintaining the appearance of someone who never thinks about something as crass as expenses. The entries tell their own story. Coal delivery, meat from the butcher, vegetables from the market, soap, candles, lamp oil, payment for the charwoman who comes twice weekly. Every penny is accounted for, because every penny matters, even if you're supposed to pretend it doesn't. You calculate silently, checking the butcher as arithmetic, because you've learned the hard way that mistakes are rarely in your favor. You note a discrepancy in the grocer's bill, circle it in pencil, prepare to send it back with a polite but firm query. This is invisible labor, the kind no one acknowledges, because acknowledging it would mean admitting that running a household requires intelligence, skill, and constant attention. Your husband believes the house simply functions, that meals appear through magic, that linens stay clean through natural order, that everything somehow manages itself while you sit peacefully with your embroidery. The servants know better, but they won't contradict the fiction. And you certainly can't, because a lady who complains about household management is really complaining about her station in life. And that's dangerously close to unhappiness, which is dangerously close to being difficult, which is dangerously close to being unmarriageable, or if already married, being labeled a poor wife. Mrs. Simmons, your cook, appears at the door with questions about dinner. Should she prepare the lamb or save it for tomorrow? Is there enough butter for the pastry, or should she send the kitchen maid to market? You make these decisions quickly weighing costs against expectations, knowing that your husband will judge the meal without understanding its economics, that guests will notice if the food is inadequate, that your reputation as a hostess rests on getting these calculations exactly right. You discuss menu options with her, navigating between what you can afford and what will appear generous. She mentions that the fishmonger had excellent sole today, and you make a quick mental calculation. Sole for Friday dinner would be appropriate, neither too extravagant nor too plain. You approve the purchase, make a note in your ledger, and dismiss her with instructions about the evening meal. The seamstress arrives next, bringing the dress you commissioned 3 weeks ago. You try it on in your bedroom, standing before the mirror while she pins and tucks, making final adjustments. The dress is beautiful, a deep blue silk that catches the light, but you're not admiring beauty. You're assessing appropriateness. Is it too fine for morning calls? Too plain for dinner parties? Does it make you look too young, too old, too eager, too indifferent? Fashion is another language you must speak fluently. and every garment is a statement you'll be judged for making. She finishes the adjustments, and you discuss payment. The negotiation is delicate, both of you aware that she needs the work, but can't appear desperate, while you need the dress, but can't appear extravagant. You settle on a price that satisfies no one, but offends no one, the Victorian compromise that keeps social machinery grinding forward. After she leaves, you turn your attention to the linen closet, that fortress of domesticity where your worth as a housewife is truly measured. You inspect sheets for wear, pillowcases for stains, towels for fraying edges. Each item is noted, cataloged, assigned a status. Good, mending needed, beyond repair. The good linens are carefully folded and stored with lavender sachets to keep them fresh and prevent moths. The ones needing mending are set aside for your evening work. The ruined ones are cut into rags because nothing is wasted in a well-run household. You check the store cupboard next, counting jars of preserves, noting what's running low. The strawberry jam from last summer is nearly gone. The pickled onions need replenishing. The dried herbs should be adequate through winter if you're careful. This inventory is crucial because running out of something means either sending a servant on an unplanned errand, which suggests poor management, or doing without, which suggests poverty. Neither is acceptable. The servant's domain requires attention too, though you must navigate it carefully. You be responsible for their work, but can't appear to supervise too closely, or you seem tyrannical. You must notice everything while appearing to notice nothing. You inspect the parlor, running a gloved finger along a picture frame, checking for dust. There's a small accumulation in the corner, evidence of hasty cleaning. You don't mention it directly to the maid, instead remarking generally that the parlor seems a bit dim and might benefit from extra attention. She understands. Everyone understands the language of indirect criticism that protects everyone's dignity while ensuring work gets done. In the kitchen, you observe preparations for dinner without seeming to observe. The vegetables being chopped, the pastry being rolled, the meat being prepared. You notice that the kitchen maid's hands are chapped and red, possibly from the harsh soap used for washing. You make a mental note to provide some glycerin, not from kindness exactly, though you feel it, but because damaged hands work less efficiently, and you need the household running smoothly. Back in your sitting room, you face the afternoon's correspondence. Letters must be answered. Invitations must be responded to. Thank you notes must be written for gifts received. Condolences must be offered for deaths announced. Each letter requires careful composition, the right tone, the appropriate level of warmth or formality, the correct balance between genuine feeling and social expectation. You select your best writing paper, uncork the ink, and begin. Each sentence is considered, revised mentally before being committed to paper, because crossed out words suggest carelessness, and carelessness suggests poor breeding. You write about the weather, about mutual acquaintances, about nothing important, because important things aren't discussed in letters that might be shared or shown. The real messages are encoded in the margins, in which news you choose to mention, and how quickly you respond, in whether you use your informal or formal signature. One letter is particularly difficult. Responding to an invitation, you must decline. You can't simply say no. That would be rude. You must express genuine regret at the conflict, suggest eagerness to attend future events, perhaps mention a vague prior commitment that can't be broken. The lie must be gracious, and the grace must appear effortless. You compose and recompose the sentences until they strike the right balance, and copy it out in your best hand. The afternoon wears on through these small, endless tasks. You be productive in a way that will never be measured or valued, because your productivity consists of maintaining systems rather than creating products. You haven't built anything or written anything meaningful, or accomplished anything that could be pointed to as achievement. You've simply kept the household functioning, kept your social obligations current, kept yourself positioned correctly within your world's elaborate structures. By the time tea is served, you're exhausted from the effort of managing everything while appearing to manage nothing. You pour yourself a cup and sit for a moment in your favorite chair, the one with the good light from the west window. The house is quiet around you, humming with the work of others, but for this brief moment, you're still. You think about your mother, who taught you all of this. How to check a ledger without appearing mercenary. How to supervise servants without seeming harsh. How to maintain a household while pretending it maintains itself. She made it look effortless, and you realize now that the effortlessness was the hardest work of all, the constant performance of competence that appears as natural grace. You finish your tea and rise again, because the work isn't finished. There's mending to be done, menus to plan for the week ahead, a shopping list to prepare, linens to rotate, silver to inventory. The labor never ends. It just shifts and transforms, an endless cycle of maintenance that keeps your world spinning while remaining invisible to everyone except those doing it. This is your afternoon. Every afternoon, a theater of domestic management where you're simultaneously director, actor, and audience. You perform efficiency while being efficient, demonstrate competence while being competent, and somehow make it all look like you're simply being naturally, effortlessly feminine. It's exhausting. It's unending. And tomorrow, you'll do it all again. Chapter 4. The Burden of Gentility. Evening approaches with that particular Victorian quality of dimness that seems designed to obscure rather than illuminate. The gas lamps are being lit throughout the house, their soft hiss a signal that the day is transitioning into its final, most performative phase. You've survived morning's social warfare and afternoon's domestic management. Now comes the evening, when you must be not just presentable but captivating, not just proper but charming, all while giving the impression that you've done nothing all day except perhaps read poetry and arrange flowers. You return to your bedroom for the elaborate ritual of changing for dinner. The dress you wore all day, already constrictive and uncomfortable, must be replaced with something more formal, more ornamental, more exhausting. Your maid reappears, and the process begins again, unlacing, unbuttoning, unhooking, and then reversing it all with a fresh corset that somehow manages to be even tighter than the morning's version. A dinner gown that's heavier and more elaborate. Jewelry that must be selected with care, because wearing too much suggests vulgar ostentation, while wearing too little suggests poverty or, worse, indifference to your appearance. Your hair, which has been slowly collapsing throughout the day, despite the armor of pins holding it up, must be completely redone. More heat, more pins, more pulling at your already tender scalp. Your maid works silently, efficiently, and you sit still, because protesting would only prolong the process. By the time she finishes, you look like a different person than the one who went calling this morning. You look expensive, fragile, ornamental, exactly what evening society requires. If you're dining at home, the performance is slightly less intense, but no less exhausting. You descend to the dining room where your husband awaits. Already seated, newspaper folded, wine poured. The table is set with precision. China, crystal, silver, each piece positioned according to rules, so elaborate they require diagrams. You take your place, and dinner is served. You're not expected to eat much. Appetite in women is considered somewhat vulgar, a base need that refined ladies rise above. So you pick delicately at your food, cutting meat into tiny pieces, leaving half of everything on your plate, sipping wine sparingly. Meanwhile, your husband eats heartily, discussing his day, his business, his opinions on politics and economics, and everything important, while you make appropriate noises of interest. Your role is to listen, to respond when prompted, to never contradict or challenge or offer your own opinions unless they perfectly mirror his. You've become skilled at this particular performance, making engaged faces while your mind wanders, asking questions that sound interested but require minimal thought to answer, providing the audience he needs without actually being present in any meaningful way. But tonight is different. Tonight you're hosting a dinner party, and the stakes are considerably higher. 8 guests are arriving at 7 o'clock, and every detail must be perfect. You've spent the week planning the menu, selecting wines, arranging flowers, ensuring the house is immaculate. Now, dressed in your most impressive gown, you wait in the drawing room for the performance to begin. They arrive in pairs, couples dressed in their own evening finest, and you greet each one with practiced warmth. Handshakes for the men, delicate air kisses for the women, compliments exchanged like currency. You guide them into the drawing room, offer sherry, manage conversation while mentally tracking time, because dinner must be served precisely at 8, not before, not after. The conversation swirls around you. Politics, business, the latest scandal involving someone you've never met. You contribute appropriately. Laugh at jokes you don't find funny. Look fascinated by stories that bore you senseless. One of the men makes a slightly improper comment, and you blush on cue, because blushing demonstrates feminine delicacy, even when you're not actually shocked. The wife of your husband's business partner, Mrs. Thornton, pulls you aside to compliment your dress, while simultaneously making it clear that hers is more fashionable. You return the compliment with equal strategic insincerity. Another woman mentions seeing you at Mrs. Pemberton's last week, and you understand this is a test. Does your social calendar match hers? Are you moving in the right circles? Do you have the connections that matter? You respond carefully, name-dropping appropriately, demonstrating your social fluency without appearing boastful. Dinner is announced, and you lead everyone into the dining room, seating them according to complex rules of precedence. Men and women alternate, spouses separated, higher-ranking guests closer to the hosts. You've spent an hour yesterday working out this seating arrangement, balancing status, personality, and the need to facilitate conversation without creating conflict. The meal proceeds through multiple courses: soup, fish, meat, salad, dessert, each served with mathematical precision. You barely eat, too focused on ensuring everyone else has what they need, that conversation flows smoothly, that no awkward silence is developed. Your hostess, moderator, and performer all at once, keeping everything moving while appearing to do nothing but enjoy yourself. Between courses, you catch Mrs. Thornton examining your china with the kind of attention that isn't quite approval. You make a mental note. Your china is inadequate. You'll need to hint to your husband that replacing it should be a priority, though you can't say this directly, because expressing material desires would be unladylike. You'll have to approach it sideways. Mention casually that Mrs. Thornton has such lovely dinnerware. Wonder aloud if perhaps our own is getting a bit worn, and hope he draws the right conclusion. The conversation at dinner is carefully managed. Politics are discussed, but you don't contribute opinions. Only ask occasional questions that allow the men to expand on their views. Literature is mentioned, and you're allowed to participate here, but carefully. You can discuss poetry, not philosophy. Novels, if they're properly moral. Nothing too intellectual or challenging. Nothing that might suggest you think too much or feel too deeply. After dinner, the women retire to the drawing room, while the men remain for cigars and brandy. This separation is ritualized, expected, and it transforms the evening into two separate experiences. In the drawing room, freed from male observation, the women's conversation shifts. They gossip, mostly, trading information about who's getting married, who's having financial difficulties, whose husband is drinking too much or staying out too late. You participate carefully, sharing some information, but not too much, listening more than speaking. The women here are simultaneously allies and competitors, friends and judges, and everything you say will be remembered, analyzed, potentially weaponized. One woman mentions that her daughter has been learning Italian, and you understand this is a status claim. They can afford the luxury of ornamental education. You counter with a mention of your own accomplishments, finding the balance between impressive and threatening. The conversation turns to health, that acceptable topic where women can discuss their bodies without being improper. Headaches, fatigue, nervousness, fainting spells, all the vague ailments that Victorian medicine lumps together as female troubles. You share your own experiences with carefully worded vagueness, and the other women nod sympathetically. No one mentions that these ailments might be connected to corsets, restricted movement, limited food intake, and the stress of constant performance. Instead, they recommend tonics, rest cures, perhaps a change of air. When the men rejoin you, smelling of smoke and alcohol, the evening enters its final phase. There might be music, someone playing the pianoforte while others sing. You're expected to participate if asked, to demonstrate accomplishment without appearing to seek attention. You play a moderately difficult piece, well enough to be impressive, but not so well that you seem to have spent hours practicing, which would suggest you had nothing better to do. Finally, mercifully, the guests begin making their departures. More handshakes, more air kisses, more promises to call soon that everyone knows are just polite noise. You smile until they're gone, and then, only then, do you allow your face to relax into something resembling your actual feelings. Your husband is pleased. The evening went well. Business connections were strengthened, social position maintained. He retires to his study for a final brandy, while you oversee the servants cleaning up, ensuring nothing is damaged or lost, that the house is restored to order. By the time you climb the stairs to your bedroom, it's nearly midnight. You've been performing for 17 hours straight, and exhaustion sits heavy in your corseted chest. Your maid helps you undress, unlacing the corset that's been compressing your organs all day. The relief is physical and immediate, but it also brings a kind of sadness. This daily unlacing is the only time you're allowed to truly breathe, and it's a private moment that no one witnesses or values. You sit at your dressing table in your nightgown, taking down your hair, removing the pins that have been biting into your scalp. You look at yourself in the mirror, and for the first time all day, you see something resembling your actual self rather than the performed version. You look tired. You are tired. But before you sleep, there's one final task. You open the small leather journal you keep hidden in your dressing table drawer. By candlelight, you write a few sentences about your day. Not the public version, but the private truth. You write about how exhausting it was to smile for hours, how your feet ache from decorative shoes, how you managed to get through dinner without screaming from the boredom of it all. You write about the performance, the exhaustion, the feeling of being a beautiful ornament rather than a living person. You write because these words hidden in this private journal are the only place you're allowed to be honest, to admit that this life of genteel leisure is actually a form of labor that no one acknowledges and everyone expects. You close the journal, hide it again, and blow out the candle. Tomorrow you'll do it all again. The corset, the performance, the careful navigation of a world designed to keep you beautiful and powerless. But tonight, for a few hours, you can simply breathe. Chapter 5. The Revolution in Whispers. Morning arrives again, as it always does, with that same pre-dawn cold and the same ritual awaiting you. But something feels different today. Perhaps it's the accumulation of performances, the weight of repeated days, or perhaps it's something smaller and more dangerous. A thought you can't quite silence anymore. What if all of this, the corsets and calling cards and carefully managed conversation, isn't natural or necessary or even normal? What if it's just a very elaborate cage? You go through the morning routine mechanically, letting your maid lace you into your corset. But today you notice things you've been trained to ignore. The way your maid's hands are raw and cracked from harsh soap. The way she hasn't eaten yet, even though she's been working for hours. The way she calls you Mom and averts her eyes, erasing herself to make you comfortable. You're both women, both trapped in systems that use you up and call it duty, but the cages look different enough that you're supposed to believe you're free. At breakfast, your husband reads from the newspaper about debates in Parliament, and for the first time, you realize you have opinions about what he's reading. Actual thoughts that don't match his. Ideas that contradict the wisdom he's delivering, as if it's objective truth. You don't speak them, not yet, but they're there, humming beneath your silence, making the silence feel less like peace and more like suppression. A letter arrives in the Morning Post, hand-delivered from Mrs. Grafton. You recognize her handwriting immediately, that careful script that somehow manages to look both proper and urgent. You open it away from your husband's eyes and read quickly. A small gathering this Thursday afternoon. Poetry and conversation. Please come if you can. Burn this after reading. The instruction to burn it tells you everything. This isn't a normal social call. This is something else, something that requires secrecy. Your pulse quickens with something that might be fear or might be excitement. You slip the letter into your pocket and continue through breakfast as if nothing has changed. Thursday arrives and you make your excuses carefully. You're visiting Mrs. Grafton. You tell your husband. A perfectly normal afternoon call. He barely looks up from his newspaper, waving you away with the casual dismissal of someone who's never had to account for his movements. You take the carriage to her address, your heart beating faster than the horse's hooves. The gathering is small, only 6 women total, meeting in Mrs. Grafton's private sitting room. They greet you warmly, but carefully, as if assessing whether you're truly one of them or a potential spy for the world. They quietly beginning to question. Tea is poured, and then Mrs. Grafton produces a book, Mary Wollstonecraft's A Vindication of the Rights of Woman. You've heard of it, of course, whispered about in shocked tones, dismissed as the ravings of an unwomanly woman, dangerous and radical. But holding it now, feeling the weight of it in your hands, you realize it's just a book. Words on paper. Ideas that someone thought were important enough to risk reputation and respectability to share. Mrs. Grafton begins reading aloud, her voice steady but quiet, as if the words themselves might escape through the windows and alert the authorities. The passages she chooses talk about education, about rationality, about the idea that women are not truly inferior, but systematically kept ignorant, that the qualities called feminine, meekness, dependence, emotional volatility aren't innate, but learned, trained, enforced through the very systems you've been navigating your entire life. The words land like small explosions in your carefully ordered mind. You've spent years perfecting the art of being decorative, and here's someone arguing that decoration was never the point, that you could be something else entirely. The possibility is terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. The other women share their own thoughts, speaking with a freedom you've never witnessed. One mentions a lecture she attended secretly about women's suffrage. Another talks about a school she wants to open where girls would learn mathematics and science, not just embroidery and French. A third admits she writes, actual writing, essays and articles that she publishes under a man's name, because her own would ensure they dismissed unread. You listen, and slowly, carefully, you begin to speak. You talk about the exhaustion of performance, about feeling like a beautiful puppet, about the way your intelligence is simultaneously demanded and dismissed. You talk about your hidden journal, about writing thoughts you could never speak aloud. The words feel dangerous leaving your mouth, like you're confessing to crimes, but the other women nod. They understand. They share this particular cage, and they're beginning to imagine what it might be like to open the door. The conversation continues for hours, far beyond the acceptable 15 minutes of a proper call. You discuss books written by women, ideas about education and property rights, small acts of rebellion, like learning things you not supposed to know, or having thoughts you not supposed to share. No one is planning to march in the streets or chain themselves to buildings. This isn't that kind of revolution, not yet. This is quieter, more subtle. Women beginning to see the systems that confine them and daring to question whether those systems are natural or just normalized. As you prepare to leave, Mrs. Grafton presses another book into your hands, wrapped in plain paper. Read it carefully, she says, and come back next Thursday if you can. You hide the book in your bag, already planning where you'll keep it, so it won't be discovered, already composing the lies you'll tell about where you were and what you did. The carriage ride home feels different. The streets look the same, The building's unchanged, but you're seeing them through new eyes. All these houses with their perfect facades. How many contain women who are also pretending, performing, slowly suffocating? How many private journals are hidden in bedroom drawers? How many secret thoughts are pressed between the pages of acceptable books? At home, you resume your role seamlessly. You ask about your husband's day. You oversee the dinner preparations. You sit in the drawing room with your embroidery. But underneath the performance, something has shifted. You're not just enduring anymore. You're observing, analyzing, beginning to understand that your exhaustion isn't personal failure, but logical response to impossible demands. That night, you write in your journal with new urgency. The words come faster, bolder, more certain. You write about the gathering, about the ideas discussed, about the feeling of being seen and understood by other women who share your cage. You write about possibility, about education and rights, and the radical notion that you might be a complete person rather than a decorative half of someone else's life. You hide the journal and the borrowed book in a false bottom of your sewing basket, a space you created months ago when you first started having thoughts that needed hiding. You blow out your candle and lie in the darkness, listening to the house settle around you. Change won't come quickly. You know this. The systems that bind you are centuries old, supported by law and custom, and the weight of everyone who benefits from keeping things exactly as they are. But change doesn't have to be sudden to be real. It can start in whispered conversations and hidden books. It can start with women admitting to each other that they're exhausted, that the performance is killing them, that there has to be another way to live. You think about the future, not the immediate future of tomorrow's calls and next week's dinner party, but the larger future. Perhaps your daughter, if you have one, won't have to wear corsets quite so tight. Perhaps she'll be allowed to have opinions without being labeled difficult. Perhaps she'll be able to own property, earn money, vote. Perhaps she'll read about women like you and Mrs. Grafton and all the others. And she'll understand that change didn't start with the first woman to march in the streets, but with the thousands who came before her, whispering rebellion in drawing rooms, writing forbidden thoughts in secret journals, quietly insisting that they were human beings who deserved to breathe. Sleep comes slowly, but when it does, you dream of doors opening, of corsets unlacing, of speaking in your real voice so loudly that everyone has to listen. When you wake, you'll put the corset back on and resume your performance. But now you know it's a performance, and that knowledge changes everything. The days that follow feel different, even though they look identical from the outside. You continue making calls, managing your household, smiling through dinners and tea parties. But underneath the placid surface, you're paying attention in new ways. You notice which women's eyes light up when certain topics arise, who changes the subject when conversation veers too close to genuine feeling, who seems trapped in the same beautiful cage you're learning to see clearly. At your next gathering with Mrs. Grafton's group, which you now think of as your secret sisterhood, the conversation goes deeper. Someone mentions the Married Women's Property Act. How until recently, married women couldn't legally own anything. How even now the laws are inadequate. How a woman's earnings, her inheritance, even gifts given to her, belong legally to her husband. You think about your household ledger, how you manage every penny, but own none of them. How your labor is invisible and your contributions erased. Another woman talks about education, about how girls' schools teach ornamental accomplishments, while boys learn Latin and mathematics and philosophy. You remember your own education. Enough reading to be interesting at dinner parties, enough French to seem cultured, enough music to entertain, but nothing substantial, nothing that might make you too confident or too capable. Independent thought. The anger starts building, not hot and explosive, but cold and clarifying. You're angry at the wasted potential, at the intelligence deliberately left undeveloped, at the way women are kept just educated enough to raise sons, but not enough to threaten the systems that confine them. You're angry at yourself for accepting it for so long, And then you're angry at the anger, because even feeling it makes you dangerous. But you channel the anger into action, small actions that no one notices but you. You start asking your husband questions about his business, not because you're making conversation, but because you want to understand how money works, how investments function, how wealth is built and maintained. He's surprised, but pleased by your interest, interpreting it as wifely devotion, rather than the beginning of your financial education. You begin reading the newspaper thoroughly, instead of skimming it for social news. Politics, economics, international affairs, all the serious subjects you are trained to ignore. You don't share your opinions, not yet, but you form them, testing your thoughts against the world's complexities, discovering that you're capable of understanding things you were told were too difficult for feminine minds. Your journal fills with more than personal observations now. You write analysis, arguments, questions that don't have easy answers. You write about systems and structures, about how power works and who holds it and what might happen if it were distributed differently. You write about other women, about the maid whose name you learned is Lucy, who works 16-hour days for wages that wouldn't feed a family, who has dreams she'll never fulfill because her life is spent making yours comfortable. One evening, you do something radical. You ask Lucy about her life. Not commanding or instructing, but actually asking. Where is she from? Does she have family? What did she want to be before service? She's startled, suspicious at first, but slowly she answers. She wanted to be a teacher, she says quietly. She likes children and books, but her family needed the money, and service pays better than most work available to working-class women. You think about the accident of birth. It made you the lady and her the maid. About how easily your positions could have been reversed. About how both of you are trapped by systems that use gender to limit possibility. You can't fix the systems, not yet, not alone. But you give Lucy the afternoon off, tell her to rest, and when she protests that there's work to be done, you insist. Small rebellions, but they matter. You're learning that resistance doesn't always look like revolution. Sometimes it looks like refusing to perform quite as enthusiastically. Sometimes it's reading forbidden books, or having forbidden thoughts, or treating servants like human beings. Sometimes it's simply surviving while staying awake, refusing to be numbed by routine into accepting that this is all there is or could be. The secret gatherings continue, and they're growing. Mrs. Grafton knows other women who know other women, and the network expands carefully, quietly. You hear about women writing articles under pseudonyms, about teachers quietly expanding curricula to include more substantial subjects, about wives having conversations with husbands about property rights and education access. Nothing traumatic is happening. No laws are changing, no barriers are falling. But something is shifting in the invisible places where culture lives, in drawing rooms, and private journals, and whispered conversations. Women are waking up to their own imprisonment and beginning, very carefully, to imagine alternatives. You continue writing, and your writing grows bolder. You draft an essay about women's education, arguing that intelligence isn't masculine but human, that women's capacity for reason matches men's, but has been deliberately stunted. You'll never publish it under your own name, probably never publish it at all, but writing it matters. It means you're taking your thoughts seriously, treating your mind as something worth developing, rather than something to be managed and contained. One afternoon, you find yourself standing in front of your bedroom mirror, corset half-laced, and you stop. You really look at yourself, at the apparatus of femininity, the corset waiting to compress you, the layers of petticoats waiting to weigh you down, the elaborate hairstyle waiting to give you a headache. And you think clearly, for the first time, this isn't natural. This is a costume we're forced to wear, and we've been taught to call the costume ourselves. You finish dressing because not dressing isn't an option, not yet. But you make a promise to yourself. You'll stop pretending the costume is comfortable. You'll stop acting like the performance is effortless. And someday, when the time is right, you'll start saying so out loud. The final entry in your journal for this period reads simply, I am waking up. 3 words, but they contain revolution. Because once you see the cage, you can't unsee it. Once you admit the performance is exhausting, you can't go back to pretending it's natural. Once you start imagining alternatives, you can't stop. The Victorian world around you continues unchanged, beautiful and suffocating, proper and poisonous. But inside you, something is different. You're still performing, still smiling, still managing households and making calls and doing everything expected. But now you're doing it consciously, strategically, while building something else in the margins of your prescribed life. You're becoming dangerous, the most dangerous kind of woman, one who thinks. And around you, in houses across the city, across the country, other women are doing the same. The revolution won't happen tomorrow, but it's happening. In journals and gatherings, in forbidden books and quiet questions, in every woman who refuses to believe that this suffocating performance is all she's meant for. You blow out your candle and settle into sleep. And for the first time in years, you're not just exhausted. You're alive with purpose, humming with possibility, dangerous with hope. Tomorrow, you'll put on your corset and your performance, but you'll do it knowing that neither defines you, that you're more than decoration, more than silence, more than the beautiful cage they've built around you. The Victorian world doesn't know it yet, but it's beginning to change. And you, with your hidden journal and secret thoughts and quiet rebellion, you're part of that change. The performance continues, but underneath it, you're becoming yourself. And that, you're learning, is the most revolutionary act of all.